Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because we've got a few slides to share with you. Well, we've already done some introductions, so we won't go too detailed into that. But just to recap, I'm a UX consultant at Torchbox. So what that means is that I'm very focused on making sure we understand the problem space from the user's perspective. And working for Torchbox, if you don't know who we are a digital product agency, and we work primarily with charities, nonprofits, and the public sector. We've actually just launched the new Buckinghamshire Council website. We work with NHS Digital and NHS Trusts, and we're also currently working with the Department of Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy. But this project that we're talking to you about today was really exciting discovery project, and all about chatbots and how can chatbots and AI help councils to deliver better services, but also help to reduce costs. And before we start, I know, Nick, that you had a poll that you could run for us. Is that something that you can run for us now? Oh, you're
right.
muted.
I'm muted. No, I shall get the poll up, and I shall put it out now.
So what we wanted to ask everyone is just, have you had a good chatbot experience in the past? And I know that it's just a very simple poll. It's just like a yes, no, or potentially you haven't really used any chatbots in the past.
Oh my God.
Or
bear with me, it's disappeared. I'm going to just quickly, if you like, carry.
Or what might be easier as well, because it's quite a simple one, we can just do a raised hand.
Right,
I think
yes.
that's better for everyone. So whether you'd prefer to raise your hand or whether you'd prefer to just kind of give a clapping emoji or a good emoji or a heart emoji, if you have had a good or positive chatbot experience before. So there you go, you can see quite a few there. Quite a few there. I can say that that's probably about a third of you. Greg's giving a laughing face. I'm not sure if that's like trolling other kind of chatbot experiences, but quite a few of you haven't raised your hand there. So, you know, that might be a symptom of things that, like, what can we do to improve these in future? I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now. And I guess one of the things before we kind of go into things in detail, just as a reminder, we will remind you throughout this, but localdigitalchatbots.github.io. We will keep reminding you of this throughout the presentation, but all of the outputs of this presentation are on there. But on that, Neil, what I wanted you to do is just to tell us a little bit more about how this project actually came about. How did this brief come up?
Sure, yeah. Obviously, Nick has stolen all my thunder in his intro, as ever. But essentially, when I was back at Oxford, MHCLG launched their national local digital fund to help encourage councils to collaborate on a range of digital topics of their choice. And in round one, which this project went on, there was a massive interest, partly because there was funding of up to 80K for discovery work. So hundreds of bids came in, and lots of interested councils, just like the ones around here today, wanted to think about work on chatbots and AI. So the question was how we do that. We started to form a sort of coalition of, I think it was in the end 13 councils, depends how you count joint councils, but we formed around a single bid to research the answer to the challenge, can chatbots and AI help solve service design problems? And Oxford City Council took the lead on the project. So when we started, the common thing was we had a common problem. We wanted to explore the opportunities that chatbots could offer, and I've heard a lot of those comments this morning, but we didn't really know where to start. But we ended up arriving at a project, getting our bid approved, and then decided on 4 areas. We looked at planning, revenues and benefits, highways, and waste and recycling as areas we thought we should research.
And, you know, from our perspective, you've already mentioned some of the key things that for us made this project very interesting. But from your perspective, Neil, like what were the key challenges that we were facing in this project?
Oh, for this one, well, from where we were, there were so many platforms available, countless suppliers offering services. What was the right one to choose? Are the technologies the right one to deliver improvement? Or are we just chasing efficiencies or the latest shiny thing because we thought we should? We needed really good research data to answer that question before we did anything. In terms of the sort of logistical issues, we had a large number of councils involved and they were spread right around the country. I think the furthest south was Ada and Worthing, and we went right up to Preston. So working together collaboratively in the same room was never going to happen. And of course, if we were doing it now, that would be perfectly par for the course. But back in 2019, it was another story. It was all a bit new. The rules of how MHCLG put the funding together at that time was we had to deliver in a set time. So we had a large number of councils spread all over the place, 4 research areas, and a limited time to actually deliver it. So that made things tricky. And also, to be honest, we knew absolutely nothing, particularly about user research. We had a lot of upskilling to do to find out what it meant, how we would actually all get involved in it. So a lot of time to learn and very little time to do it. Those were the key ones.
Yeah, and you know, when we got this brief and a lot of these challenges, and particularly the need to potentially upskill the team so that people could feel confident in doing this type of stuff moving forward as well, all of this helped shape the program of work that we recommended. So, you know, without diving into too much of the detail, you know, we got all together in Birmingham, I think it was. That was like the kind of the central place for everyone to get together. We had like a shared sense of what common objectives were and what the direction should be. But we did a lot of prep work for this. As Neil mentioned, we didn't have a lot of time to run this project. So from our perspective, getting everything up and ready so that when we did get everyone together, working together, we could just hit the ground running. The training, which I'll talk to you a little bit more in a bit, but the main things that we did were called research sprints. So we did 1 week on each of the service areas that we mentioned, and we did this repeatable format so that by the end, everyone is going through the kind of same process and we were helping to learn from one another. In terms of who we worked with, you can see there that like planning was in Oxford, waste and recycling was Northeast Derbyshire and Bolsover, etc. And we decided this in kickoff, but Neil, I remember like the way that we decided this, because there were 13 councils. It's like, well, who does Torchbox go in and research for, and who goes away and does their own research? That was a funny thing to decide, wasn't it? Especially for Redditch and Bromsgrove for revenues and benefits.
Yeah, we had a particular issue with Revs and Bens because you can probably tell by that date, 25th of March, that's just coming to the end of the financial year, which is when people in Revs and Bens go crazy, run around doing lots of stuff in order to get ready for the new year. So they really needed the help. So it was great that Torchbox went up there and actually ran their user research. For us in Oxford, we went first as the guinea pigs, but I was going to say, if I'm leading the project, I'm going to have the experts in on site. So that will kind of determine that one. And the others, I can't remember too closely how we came up with it, but I think often it was there were occasions where the lead council who said we're really interested in this area were the ones that got the Torchbox help on hand on site.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in order for the councils that were doing their own research, as I mentioned, we did some training, which is one of the things we wanted to kind of touch on. One of the things that we prepared, and again, if you have that link, all of this is available on that link that we shared. We'll bring it up again later. But we put together these more like functional outputs from user research. The tendency when you work with agencies is you have, you know, really flashy outputs. But if you're producing this yourself, you know, and you need to use whether it's PowerPoint or Excel, just opening PDFs, you know, we created everything that they needed to run the user research themselves, from this interview scripts, which we practiced together. You know, that was really good, doing a bit of role playing, you know, what to expect when you talk to someone about their experiences, and what does it feel like to actually capture all your observations, so that you can then communicate it to the rest of your team and help you make good decisions. So all of this stuff is out there and ready. So if any of you want to kind of download these and use them for your own purposes, please feel free. But one thing that we did as well, and we did some fun things just to remind people how different user behaviors are around the country. So we did something like the dialect quiz. If you haven't done this yet, it's quite fun to do, whether it's with friends or with the company you work for. So the New York Times dialect quiz, they ask you a bunch of questions and then they tell you where your dialect actually comes from around the country. So we did this is just an example, what words would you use to describe a piece of long cushioned furniture in the main room of a lounge? I would say couch or sofa. I think, Neil, you probably say sofa as well.
Yeah,
But,
my wife would never let me say settee, and I think chaise longues is a little beyond us.
Yeah, but it just shows you like how people talk about things in very different ways around the country, and this was just to start giving people that sense of it's so important to do that user research to understand these nuances, not just in terms of language, which is super important for chatbots in terms of how you train the chatbot, especially when you have very complex kind of areas that they're meant to be dealing with. But also service delivery might be different depending on the area that you're working in.
We actually had a good example of that, Luiza, with if you take waste. I had a friend who lived and worked in Reading, and the term skip, which is pretty universal, I'd have thought, in Reading they call it a grundon, which is a bit like calling a vacuum cleaner a Hoover. You know, it's a very supplier-based thing, but grundons were skips. So yeah, it can affect how people look for language on your website and also in a chatbot.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did stuff like this, but generally speaking, Neil, because I know I was running the research training with everyone there, and I thought it was super helpful for everyone. But you participated, so like, what were your key takeaways?
Well, it was great to get such a wide range of people involved. So we had some of our internal stakeholders, some from our customer services team who hadn't done user research yet involved. The great thing for me, and I hope people find this when they go to the site, is having everything there as a framework to work from gives you, you're not working from scratch. You've got something you can start with to help you form ideas, and the discipline around using a script, the discipline around recording properly, and then leading on to creating the user journey map was just invaluable. So I would really recommend it if anyone is looking at doing this for the first time.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I remember very clearly was how many people were shocked at how long it takes to plan and to do this, to do user research properly. And I know we have at least one other user researcher on the call who kind of understands the kind of the admin pains, I guess, of how long something takes to plan, especially with GDPR as well. You know, there's a lot of things you need to be quite strict with yourself, but hopefully, yeah, there's a lot of templates out there that can help you on that website. Looking at like the actual sprints, the weeks and how we ran things, we did 2 days of interviews, followed by some days of like observation, capturing, and the analysis and the synthesis of all that. But I wanted to focus on the Friday, which is when we did our demo. And that's when we did like a show and tell. Everyone that's involved in the process would join in the call. And this is, we're at this point, we're back in the offices and we're having a chat and showing what we found and sharing our knowledge and experiences. And there's one great thing about this project in terms of the training and the upskilling for everyone to have more of that UX thinking behind their work. We really wanted everyone to feel really comfortable with, if this is the first time you're doing user research, it's likely that you'll get things wrong. It's likely that you'll find some things really difficult. And we wanted everyone to feel comfortable communicating those things and saying, actually, in my process, I really struggled with this, or actually, I feel like I didn't do a good enough job at this. If only I had done this, it would have been better. And stuff like that really helped, didn't it, Neil? Because, I mean, you mentioned you were on the first week in terms of the guinea pigs, but the people who came last in the process, I felt like they had really benefited from this, didn't they?
Yeah, there was a lot of learning on the way, and the way we did it was using these show and tells to feedback what we found and what some of the issues and problems were. I think the thing we probably haven't captured, Luiza, is that it wasn't just one council looking at one area. So for planning, I think there were 4 councils looking. So those show and tells brought everyone back that had been involved, and we left the option open to you had to be in at least one area, but you could do more than one. And we had the very brave Claire from Cheltenham, who ended up doing 3 research areas, which is just on her own, which was just incredible. But all of that stuff, it gave us the chance to bring it together, see what the commonalities were, see what the differences were. But for the large part, it proved the idea that you don't need lots and lots of people doing lots and lots of research. The messages were very, very common in those research areas.
Yeah, and in terms of us then at the end, bringing all of that together is what informed our final outputs and the reporting that we did right at the end. So again, I've got that link right at the top there for any of you who are interested. There's lots of really interesting outputs from this project. We have the more specific reports, so whether you're interested in the user research itself, in the ROI analysis and market summary, we've got a technology landscape review. We've also got like a functionality matrix that is probably, it might be out of date now because this was done in 2019, but probably still worth having a look at in terms of the different things that we're trying to compare, what the different features are. But the case studies that we pulled together right at the end were the things that could really tell the story for each of those service areas that we looked at. And we mentioned earlier that one of the things that we wanted to give back to councils was a body of research that would help you feel like you're not really starting from scratch. And some of the things that came out from that research that we wanted to share with you is that there are certain drivers that will push people to actually pick up the phone and want to talk to a human being. So the things that we found is that if the matter is urgent, like they need to take care of it right now, they can't wait. If it's unfamiliar, people might be a little bit confused. They don't really, they don't really have time to go away and try and research and figure out a problem. They really just want someone like an expert to talk to and to give them that helping hand and have a bit more hand-holding. A complex issue, it might be that it's not a simple thing where you can just go and get a little bit of data, but it's, it's an involved long-term process, like a lot of things feeding into it. It's better just to talk to someone and get that reassurance, and particularly if it's an emotional and subjective matter. In these cases, it's always frustrating. Like if you just want that reassurance, you want to talk to a human. I think talking to a robot can just exacerbate frustrations and anxieties. So these were the kind of drivers that we found if someone just wants to pick up the phone. And looking at this as a model, we actually then, in the case studies, there's more information about this in our reports, but for the purpose of this talk, we just wanted to quickly show you in a few bullet points what is, typically a bad candidate for a potential chatbot or AI solution. And this is things like you might require specialist help. It's a complex, subjective, and emotional topic. These things are really interesting as well. Like, what if there is a low data available and you rely on paper processes? So how can you have a chatbot or AI solution if everything's done on paper and you're keeping everything in ring binders? Like if you don't have that data trail online, digitally available, or using different APIs to connect different systems together, it's going to be really hard for you to pull together like a meaningful chatbot or AI solution. And also if it's a really reactive type of service, so it might be that you won't be able to proactively meet the needs of people that are needing to use your services. And finally, I've just put here in a very kind of simple format, the return on investment framework that we were adhering to. So the main thing that we would look at is look at the volume of calls that you have. Look not just at the volume of them, but what is the value of that volume of calls that you get across different departments or across your council. And the resolution rate was a key thing for us. So the resolution rate is how easily can the call center, whoever picks up the phone first, can they resolve that call within just that first phone call, within just that that first staff member, or would they have to transfer onto someone else or get someone else to help solve that problem? The bad candidate would be if your call center or if your team there, they can't help the person within that first phone call. That means that generally there is a low target value that could be addressed by chatbots or AI. If we just flip that into what a good candidate then looks like, it's just the kind of the mirror image of that, right? So a good candidate is when people have that ability to self-serve. We found that people, they don't want to bother the council. They know that the council are busy. Generally, they would rather do things themselves, and then picking up the phone is actually a last resort. So help people to self-serve. If information and the tasks are simple, they're not subjective, so things like planning or talking about benefits, for example, that might be, there's a little bit more gray areas into there. Maybe a bot is not so suited for that sort of stuff. Having that existing data, digital processes, being able to be proactive, as we mentioned. And yeah, if you do have a very high volume of calls and if they can be resolved really easily, that is just like a fair way of saying that a bot could be really helpful here to help address that and to help save you some costs.
I think there was another area that came out from that as well, Luiza, which was the span of potential inquiries. So something like planning can be massive, really, really wide. So what you'd need to put into your bot to be even half helpful is so large. When it came down to things like highways or waste, they narrowed right down. So the work needed to be done by a chatbot was far easier, was far more predictable. So that they were better candidates that way too.
Yeah, so that complexity and breadth of service is a really big one, because again, just like with the language, you have to train your bot to do all sorts of tasks or to help resolve different types of queries. And the more complex or the more broad that is, not only is it more expensive to build something to begin with, but then you have to maintain that as well as you move forward. So it's not just like that one-off cost, but into the future, what does that mean for the ongoing cost that you have as a council? And all of this, I mean, this is hopefully trying to simplify all of the stuff that kind of came out of our work, but the case studies are where you can really find a good, a simple snapshot of the key findings that we had, the numbers behind each of those in terms of the return on investment, specific quotes that we had from both stakeholders and the users themselves as well. And when you're looking at improving the service, we also called out opportunities that we were seeing there about how a chatbot or AI solution could help. So for example, for waste and recycling, and I know that there's a few of you interested in that, we know that a lot of people complained about their bins going missing. And in some councils, they said like, well, actually, our bin men have an app, and if the bin accidentally gets swallowed by the car, and sometimes that happens, they actually report that. So there is data for that. So what if the council could proactively text people and say, we're really sorry, but your bin got damaged. We are going to send you a replacement one, before the person goes like, oh my God, like, where's my bin? I need to call the council to figure out where my bin is. So there's little things like that that chatbots could do to help and really help to delight users and customers and help to reduce frustrations and anxieties. But yes, on that, I know, Neil, you definitely had some things to share about what happens now. We did these, and the waste and recycling was the one winning candidate that we felt for an alpha project.
It was, which was, useful, well, informative for us, because we came into this looking to see what we could do about planning. Could we have a chatbot? Wouldn't that be great? And actually, the research showed us it's absolutely the worst candidate based on the data we had in Oxford. And I think that was borne out by some of the others. It was useful. We were able to take that information, that research, and use it internally to say, please don't cancel the planning drop-in advice service that people can use, because now we know people really need to speak to someone, because it's a complex, emotional, subjective area with lots and lots of complexity. So straight off the bat, we were able to use that So one of the questions I often get asked is, what did you do with all this research next? There was a potential of us having an alpha project in the next round of bidding, but we really couldn't get that together. I was a bit burnt out by doing the project, and other councils had other priorities, so it's kind of drifted away. But what I'm really hoping is that people will take that research and run with it, which is exactly what West Berkshire have done. They built a waste and recycling chatbot based on the research, and I've also been to a conference that Jadu ran on chatbots and AI, which the research was being presented to me, which was kind of great. We got a bit of a shout out, so it's obviously being used by a key platform provider, so there is some use to it. We found out lots of other things too. I mean, the simple message that chatbots are just part of a wider user journey. They're not something in themselves. They're not a solution. So we need to look at that wider user journey. And as Luiza said, that self-serve, people want to self-serve. So let's focus on that bit. We saw lots of examples of people trying to use the website but just not finding what they wanted. So we can start with that. We can start with better content design on our website and help people cheaply and quickly without having to resort to spending tens of thousands of pounds. The other thing that I think is really important is this idea of it, when we do use them, if we focus on areas of high volume with low complexity, we're taking out really low value work for a customer contact center, which means the resource that's freed up, we can actually spend on people that need it, that are more vulnerable. There's a great vox pop in the middle of those case studies from someone saying, anyone that invents a chatbot should be put in jail in Russia and never let out. And this is a particularly vulnerable individual, had all kinds of needs, and he couldn't even handle telephones. He just needed someone to see face to face. So, we're never going to convince people like that to take up on a project, but that's fine. If we're using them for other things that are late at night, report your missed bin, that's what people want to do. We can spend more time on vulnerable people. But as I keep coming back to, the outputs of the project are all there. We deliberately made them so they would be reusable. We want people to run away and use them. So do go and have a look. We've also written up all the show and tells. You can watch them if you want to. We've written up a summary. We've pulled out some of those vox pops. So hopefully it's pretty accessible for people to get into. If you do want to know more about the project, I'm happy to people to get in touch with me at Dorset, but hopefully all your answers are in there, really.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, going back to like the purpose of this, and I know, Neil, like you could have gone straight into an alpha, like if you had a hypothesis, that could have been a good thing, and you could have spent money on an alpha, a government alpha project, to then maybe figure out that it wasn't quite the right thing, and that would have been okay too. But doing a discovery program where you're implementing the user research and design thinking from the outset is very important, and sometimes it's a step that's missed a little bit, which is why we thought it was really important to do this talk with all of you today. We definitely feel, and one of the kind of working ethos that we have at Torchbox is that before you can find the right solution, you need to make sure that you're focusing on the right problem. And that is a way to de-risk your process. It's a way to make sure you're not spending loads of time and effort and money on things that potentially aren't the right thing. So this project was really exciting, and not only because I got to work with Neil, who's absolutely fantastic, but everyone across the councils, everyone was so great. So yeah, just really excited to be able to share this with all of you today. And I think that's it from us. I think that's all that we had prepared for you today.
Well, I wouldn't say like that. That was quite a lot. That is all. People, do you want to unmute? Get your cameras on, and I'll invite you to ask questions or make some observations before I throw everyone into 2 breakout rooms, because as people will know from yesterday, I've now got this new functionality, this breakout room functionality, and insist on using it at every opportunity.